Welcome to the second lesson in the series of how to contend for the faith. And today we're going to be talking about how to contend for the faith in the family. There is an attack against the family going on right now by the enemy and our own sinful nature. But this isn't anything new. The first marriage brought sin into the world. The first family unit brought murder, the first murder of all time. The enemy's attack on the family is as old as time itself. It is absolutely nothing new. And the enemy he's not working alone. He does not have to make us do these things. All he has to do is appeal to the nature inside of us. We want to sin. And that sin is the problem. Over the years, the enemy's tactics may have changed, but his intent has not changed. And now we live in a society that purposefully targets the family. Because of the society in which we live, selfish motives and desires run rampant in our families. Sexuality, pornography. So many households struggle with these things. Anxieties creeping in from the parents all the way down to the children. Anxieties and the evils that come of these anxieties. Even places of education and places of entertainment have begun targeting children and encouraging and educating them in sin. Sin is the problem. And the solution to this comes back to a key issue, and it's something that it's hard to talk about, it's hard to listen to. It's all about submission. That word submission seems downright anti-American. Sometimes I hear that word submission, I just want to go throw some tea in the harbor. It's a hard word to stomach. But it's so incredibly important. It's so important that for 20 years, I've been teaching a phrase to teenagers. Hopefully they all remember somewhere in their mind. It's not about you. Get over yourself. It is such an important phrase when understanding submission in the life of a Christian. Paul begins in addressing this about the family, about contending for the faith in the family. He begins by talking about submission. So let's begin with him in Ephesians chapter 5. We'll start with verse 21 and we'll read to the end of, or we'll actually read until chapter 6, verse 4. And it says this: "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. For he who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but he feeds and cares for it, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." Now, that entire passage is all about submission, and we can't lose sight of that, or we can get very, very distracted by all the different applications. We are forgetting sometimes what he's applying. It's all about submission. Husband-wife relationship. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands by respecting them. Husbands, submit yourselves to your wives by loving them. And that particular part of that passage reminds me of a whole bunch of 90s movies, as things often do remind me of 90s movies. But one particular one that comes to mind is Liar, Liar. Fletcher Reed, he had everything. He was a good lawyer. He made lots of money. He had a great house, took care of his wife, bought things for his son. But his wife was leaving him, and his son, like the wife, both feel like he abandoned them. How is that possible? He bought all this stuff for them. He provided for them. How is it that they could feel abandoned by him? Well, you find out through the course of the movie that he actually did love them, but he needed to choose to love them. It needed to be sacrificial love. And it's the same for wives. It all comes down to this submissive, sacrificial. But it doesn't stop there. The passage didn't stop there. It also talks about the relationship between parents and children, because the enemy is not just attacking husbands and wives, but the enemy is attacking, and our sinful nature is attacking the parent-child relationship and the whole raising children up in the Lord. And we need to contend for the faith, absolutely. The enemy wants to destroy our children by appealing to our selfish desires. And that goes the same for children as it does for the parents. So first, to the children, the enemy wants the children of all ages, anyone who has a parent, to listen to our rebellious and selfish hearts. Now, the passage does specifically say to obey. And it's true, there is an expiration date on how long that is able to happen. But the honor never expires. That goes on and on. And it is absolutely important, because selfishly, that goes against what our heart wants. Our heart wants us to focus on ourselves. And it takes self-sacrifice. It takes submission to honor our parents as they ought to be honored, as we honor the Lord. And parents, the enemy wants to appeal to our busyness, not business, but busyness and personal problems. All those things that draw our attention inside and away from our children. No one has time to raise kids in the Lord. We seem to find time for all kinds of stuff, but it seems like nobody has time just given to them to raise children in the Lord. But we have to make the time, because it is the most important thing. My parents aren't perfect. I'm not perfect. But my testimony of my life in the Lord, who I am today in the Lord, is in extremely large part thanks to my parents. You know, we're in the nursery right now, and I haven't addressed the fact that we're here, just set up here. But it reminds me, when I was thinking about my testimony, this room reminded me that I was raised in the Lord since birth. I grew up through church nurseries. The church family was part of my family, and that upbringing didn't guarantee my outcome. It didn't promise that I would be okay with the Lord all my life, because I have made mistakes over the years. Over the years, I've made many mistakes, but everything that I have that have helped me turn my life around, redirect my life, come back to the Lord in those times that maybe I've slipped away or drifted away a bit in sin. All of those things were thanks to my parents' devotion to my upbringing in the Lord. The tools that they gave me when I was a child, they never left me. And it's my prayer for your children, my children, that they too can have that very same testimony. We will slip away, we'll fall away. That's just what we do. But that teaching remains, and it is absolutely important for our children to have. The world is evil, and our family is targeted by the world, by the enemy, by our sinful nature. And the enemy is appealing, is luring our sinful nature to attack our family, to destroy it. In our study that we're about to do, let's look at how the poison of envy and selfish ambition threatens to destroy our families. But let's also study how submissively respecting our husbands, loving our wives, honoring and obeying our parents, and raising our children in the Lord contends for the faith, for our family.